Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into the episode, I need you to do the 3 S's for me. What is that? First of all, I need you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode of our podcast. Number 2, I need you to share it with your family and friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else. Lastly, I need you to say something. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to see from us, what you like, what you don't like. We are open to your suggestions. We want to know everything that you want to let us know about the podcast. All right. Now, get back to the episode. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share to our podcast on all of your podcast listening platforms. Also, make sure you guys are checking us out on our YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Well, you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is our sister podcast, as well as the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Also on there, you will find a couple other podcasts that we have, and we definitely have some more podcasts coming. So make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, so you don't miss an episode of the podcasts that we already have, and also the exciting new podcast that we have coming up. So make sure you guys follow us there. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube. All right. Also, our podcast is brought to us by, or should I say, it's sponsored by our new school platform, which is the Deal to Heal School for Living, which is to help us to promote even more our mission to help people deal, heal, and fulfill by bringing you resources and workshops to help you on your journey. And so you guys can check out the Deal to Heal School for Living on the school platform. And it's the first 7 days absolutely free. You can go there, you can check it out, see if you like it, check it out. The couple of workshops that's already available, and then if you decide to stay, it's only $27 a month, and each month you have access to a new workshop. We have workshops on grief, we have workshops on overcoming failure, we have workshop on finding your purpose. There's a lot of different workshops, and so make sure that you go there in order to check that out. Again, that's the Deal to Heal School for Living on the school SKOOL school community platform. Make sure you guys go and check that out. We're very excited about that. But we're on a mission. So today, just like any other day, we are blessed with a guest, Miss Julie. How you doing?
Good to be here. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, first of all, for being here, because you could have been doing anyone else, or you could have been anyone else. I am messing up my whole little tagline. Okay. You could have been anywhere else with anyone else. But you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate you being here. So, Julie, do me a favor. Introduce yourself to my listeners. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay. Hi, I'm a wife of my husband's Steve for 34 years now, I think it is. I live in Newport Richey, Florida, and raised 4 kids here in our small town. Because of my daughter's passing in 2020, which I'll talk more about later, we really launched me into not just being a life coach, but specializing in grief and loss. So I definitely help people one-on-one, both in person and online. I had to speak her story because she died from fentanyl. So I bring awareness of that and tell her story, to bring education and to reduce this epidemic, terrible epidemic we're in. I also do workshops on grief locally and online, and speak pretty much whatever is needed with grief, as well as officiating services. I'm an ordained minister as well. And we have a support group that I began at my church. So I'm very much about support groups as well. So whole lot to do with grief and loss, because it's a huge issue. And I just want to help anyone I can. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Definitely a big part of my story as well. After losing my mom and my mother-in-law some years ago, which kind of propelled me into a lot of the stuff that I do now. I also started a nonprofit called Ann Christine Charities after my mom and my mother-in-law's actually doing bereavement support groups, because after their passing, I went and did bereavement support myself. And I stayed there for over a year as a volunteer because I loved it so much. And then after that year, I started, my own nonprofit, again, called Ann Christine Charities, doing bereavement support groups. And so, yeah, I definitely understand that that whole journey and everything that goes into that. So we're going to jump right into this thing a little bit more, Julie, because you mentioned, I was just like to say there's a story before the story, right? There's a version of us before we start doing what we're doing, and whatever that thing is, allows us to move forward. And so, you mentioned about your daughter, and that kind of was the beginning of everything that you're doing now. So take us back, who was Julie and her husband and, her daughter before, the incident, and then, what was that incident and how it promoted you into doing everything that you do now.
Yeah, well, I went to school for counseling and psychology, got a BA on that, and had a, like, I don't know how to explain it. I was kind of like drawn to grief in college with the bereavement class I took. So I remember that after the fact, right? And but it definitely, and I focused on raising my kids. I did some jobs, but I didn't do really what my degree was about. While they were growing up, I wanted to be there for them, and that was my focus. Very active part of our church. She was our oldest and only girl. We have 3 boys that are all grown now, and so our only girl, and she loved her brothers. She loved every time one of them was born, and she fit right in with them. She was feminine, but she also fit right in with them. And my husband used to have an airsoft business, so the kids grew up kind of playing airsoft together and with him. So that was a cool part. Financially, that wasn't the best, but we were a together family, and she didn't really. There was really no problems with her until some issues more later in her high school years. But long story short, she had a boyfriend that actually died from alcohol, and then after that, reunited with this young man who she knew from high school, and ended up, they had 4 children together. So she didn't think she wanted to be a mom. And then when she got pregnant, it changed. Her world was very much about her kids, and she loved her kids. There was a drug, issue with her boyfriend in the past, but he was clean when they met. And then it circled back around, and a lot of it didn't come out until after. They were very avid marijuana smokers, very out with that. But bottom line, they ended up moving to Tennessee, where I'm in Florida, but they moved to Tennessee at one point. And long story short, it was only about a year or so after they moved there that the kids were removed from their home. And it did have to do with drug related things. I don't know the whole story, probably never will. And then she ended up in jail in January of 2020. She was only in for about a month and a half. And the way I share it, when I typically share it in short form, is that on that February 27th, which wasn't long before the lockdown, his mom and I were friends, her boyfriend's mom and I, and she called me and she was frantically flipping out saying, Julie, because basically we knew that he was going to be turning himself in and then bailing himself out of jail because they were both guilty. But she was supposed to be in. I didn't think there was any chance of bail. So she's calling me saying he didn't just bail himself out, he bailed her out too. And I had the worst gut feeling I've ever had in my life. It was like alarm going off inside of me, warning me something, dangerous was around the corner. And I got off the phone, called my best friend. She helped calm me down because I was really upset. And then Heidi called me, and I knew she was under the influence of something, but she didn't admit to that. And we had a really long conversation that day. I asked her, did she know that a popular hip hop artist, which was Toby Mac, by the way, in case anybody knows who that is, did she know that he lost his son to a fentanyl overdose? I don't know why. It just came out of my mouth. And she said, yeah. And I say she acted like she would have nothing to do with it, but she was aware. And little did I know that was going to be my last day ever talking to my daughter. Her boyfriend and her had determined to part ways on that Sunday. They knew they weren't good for each other. They knew they were codependent, and that they caused each other to fall, and the drugs was part of it. But I didn't know how bad that was until later. That Sunday morning, I woke up to 3 missed phone calls, knowing they were from Tennessee, and hoping it was going to be her when I called the number. But when I called the number, it was a woman. And I say, sometimes I get a little emotional here. Just a second.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Take your time.
Yeah. It's the phone call you never want to get. She said your daughter overdosed on fentanyl, was flown to a Nashville hospital, and is extremely unconscious and very non-responsive. Long story short, we went up there that day, got there as quick as we could. They said they were going to be, they chilled her body to try to stop the damage, would be warming it back up the next day. Got there and saw her lifeless body, very inflamed, all connected to tubes, her beautiful blue eyes dilated in pinpoint position. The next day they did a test and it determined there was no more blood flow to her brain. So she was determined as legally brain dead at that point. Mm-hmm. So she left behind, 4 children, and her boyfriend, it's a long story, but he ended up skipping his probation and going around the country wherever. They ended up putting out a warrant for his arrest for her death because he knowingly bought fentanyl, and he is in prison. Without going into the whole story because we don't have time, he's in prison now, and he went into prison last December approximately, after the sentence time was determined, and the state went after him because in the state of Tennessee, if you buy fentanyl knowingly and you give it to somebody, they die, they can go for second-degree murder. So he wasn't charged with second-degree murder, but he did get 14 years in prison. So it's a huge story. So their children got adopted out, and no time to go into that story. We tried. We were doing everything we could to get them. They had to be adopted out. So there's there's death loss and there's living loss that I'm still going through.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, the last statement, because when we think about grief, a lot of times, I'll say when we think about grief, a lot of times we only associate it with the loss of a life, but you can grieve the loss of anything, right? You can grieve the loss of a job, the loss of the life or the way that you thought your life would be, the way that you thought your grandchildren's life would have or should have been, and then everything turns around and you're like, oh, that didn't work out, and so you can grieve that because it was like, no, it should have went this way, and so I'm glad that you pointed that out, because grief affects everything, any type of loss, not just the loss of, a loved one. I shared earlier on a podcast episode not too long ago that I lost of my pets, right? Ever since I was a kid, I loved turtles. And when I became an adult, I bought 2 turtles and I had them for 10 years. And they just both, it was crazy that one died, and then like maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month later, the other one died, but I had these turtles for 10 years, you know what I'm saying? And so like, that was a loss for me, and so, just to point out again that grief affects any type of loss. Like you can grieve any type of loss, and not just the loss of a loved one. even though that's the most common, the most common one. And so,
Yeah.
Julie, on this journey now, after losing your daughter, and then and I want to point this out too, because this is great, because you mentioned about you had already taken counseling courses and things in college, right? And that was prior to any of this happening, and being drawn to the bereavement, just like a little thing with the bereavement.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I say is, purpose leaves clues. And a lot of times we don't recognize those clues until they're front and center, right? And so I shared the story before about when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, probably 17, 18, or 19, right around that time. I'll make it brief, because I know the the audience that heard this story a lot of times. But we went to this corner store. It was maybe like 10 o'clock at night. We go to this corner store just to grab some of the snacks or whatever. And while we're in there, these two guys walk in, two African American guys. One is like regular height, maybe 5'4", whatever, and the other guy is a big guy. He's like, could have been a football player, like he's huge. The big guy is crying, like literally crying when they come in, and the smaller guy is trying to console him. So they ended up, when we go to the counter to leave, they ended up being right in front of us, right? So it's me there in front of me, and there's maybe like 3 or 4 other customers in front of them. We're all in line for the register. And so just listening to their conversation, I could tell that it was a female who passed. I don't know whether it was a mom or sister or wife, I don't know, but I know it was a woman. And like I said, the smaller guy was trying to console the bigger guy. And so they're talking and whatever. And so after a few minutes, the big guy turns and he takes his fist and he hits the top of the counter, right? And it's like one of those moments, like in a movie, when like everything stops. It was that he hits the counter and echoes like boom throughout the store. Everybody stops and turns and looks at him. And he's like, I just want some cigarettes. And so everybody that was in front of him moved out the way. He walked up to the front. They bought their cigarettes. They walked out the door. I don't think I've ever seen those two guys before that day. I definitely haven't seen them since that day. That story happened when I was like 18 or 19 years old, as a kid. Fast forward, when my mom passed away, and I go to the bereavement sessions, and I'm, a part of it. And I really, again, just like you, this is like my space. Like I love it here. And so I end up staying there again for a year, just as a volunteer, helping with the services and helping, with the sessions with other people. This is years later, maybe 20 years later almost. But that story comes back to my mind. Like there was a reason why I remember that day and that story. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
For all the years that passed. And that's why I say, purpose leaves clues. And, when you're going to, take these counseling classes, and you don't know why you liked the bereavement and how that would show up again in your life later on. But once you start walking in purpose, then you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And this happened. And all of those things kind of, connect you together. And so, so that coming together with you, even with your, once you did start the bereavement and start creating everything around your daughter, I just like to mention that, because a lot of times those things they're already there. The signs is there, but we never recognize them until it's time.
That's well said, because and I always wanted to help people. And then I remember when it became sometime raising the kids, it became like, I want to help people's hearts heal. And I knew I wasn't nursing or doctor. That was not my calling. Anything physical. I mean, I believe in physical taking care of us too, but it was like, I want to help you. And then, to realize that longing to help hearts heal was God is tying it into that pain point of grief. And I didn't know that, so there's another little part of it too. And, not knowing how that would look, but just having that longing to do that. So I definitely do. And some of the things, a big part of this that God brought in, I'm very much about the word of God, and I'm a strong follower of Jesus Christ. But one thing that he kind of manifested to me without going in story is bringing the serenity prayer, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And then it's longer than that. A lot of people think that's the whole prayer. It's longer than that, but I'm going to leave it at that. That right there, and then putting it with the circle of control, which I didn't know there was such a thing. If you look online, they try to charge for these things and whatever, but they use them in therapy in all ages, but with children too. And so he showed me to put that together for me first. And then I realized to bring that into my coaching and the workshops. And I also have a YouTube channel where I talk about grief and loss. I started my channel, I think it was 13 years ago, forget exactly, for my sign language to music. So that's on my channel as well. That's why I began the channel. But now all my content is based on mental health, grief and loss, and also Bible teaching mixed in with that. So, but anyway, that just became really important for me because basically my daughter died right before the lockdown. So the journey's ongoing for lifelong, and that's another thing we need to always stress. If people ever tell you to get over it, just respectfully walk away, because that is not your job to get over anybody, or it's to work through it and to get help and so forth so that we can heal. But all of this was going on during COVID. So my world was not about COVID. My world was about trying to get my grandkids, wondering if this thing in the background of, I won't even go into, it wasn't my background, but wondering if this thing might've popped up. Well, it ended up being the main reason why we didn't get them. But I'm not going to go into that story, but I just put it before, God, and said, if we're supposed to get them, we're doing everything we can to get these children, and you'd think it'd just be automatic, but it's not. And everything was elongated because of COVID, all the paperwork and everything between here and Tennessee. So anyway, that was my world. I wasn't caught up in COVID. I was caught up in my grief and my trying to have the grandkids in my life and maybe heal together, maybe grieve together. That never really happened, because of the distance, because of the system between us. And that was the most heart-wrenching part about this, because Heidi's gone, my daughter's gone. I was able to accept that she was gone, but this is her children. This is my grandchildren, and so it was very heart-wrenching. But the circle of control helped me a lot to just every day wake up and go, okay, what do I need to do today that's in my control that I can do? And then once that's done, I have to wait. And there's so many Fridays that I would think we were going to, some kind of an answer or something was going to be done, and it wasn't. And I'm telling you, COVID, I think everybody knows that, but it got all drawn out. So with that, it became just so important. My trust in God, hugely important. And then when I had to let them go a year later to be adopted out, the day after my daughter's birthday, it was like, that circle of control concept became even more important to me, because it was like, okay, it's out of my control. Because the parents said, you better take your last visit. So we went to Tennessee to get our last 2-hour visit of those kids, and not knowing, and they had slam dunk with 4 kids running around a playground for 2 hours with the caseworker sitting in the car. And then to not know if we'd ever see them again, because the parents wouldn't do an open adoption. We actually could have done that, but they wouldn't do it. So that day I actually I said, I'm going to sign on to this 1-year coaching program for me, for my own personal development, and to learn how to be a life coach, to learn how to have a business. And I did. So that was like my intentionality. Like, I'm letting go of them. I don't know what's going to happen. I have hope, but I can't have false hope, because my heart will be broken more. My heart's already broken enough. So I have to let them go. But here's what I'm going to go do. I said, we're going to go to this park. We're going to go hiking, because nature and hiking is still so important to me in my grief. And I'm like, we're going to go to this restaurant, and I'm signing the dotted line to your program. And that's what's in my control. So I hugely, that was a huge help to me through this. And it's also what I share with people one-on-one. And we're all unique. Every one of our losses are unique. And when Ernest said about how all these different things can be lost, I totally agree with him. And then within that, you have to realize we're unique. You can't anticipate how you're going to be with any loss until it happens. You cannot predict. You can learn things about grief that could prepare you. And I encourage you all to do that, because it's going to happen. If it hasn't already happened, a life-changing loss. My daughter was my life-changing loss. Absolutely. So if it hasn't happened yet, it will. So there's definitely things we can learn that might prepare us, but we don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like until it happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I want to point something else out too that I'm glad that you said. Number one, I love hiking. Right. I just started like a year or so ago, and I started a hiking group. It was 7 of us when I started it, and now we're like at 130 people
Wow.
in this group now. It's great. I definitely, for your mental health and just for the grounding of getting back and have just for the peace of yourself, there's nothing better than
Oh my
being in
gosh.
nature. Nothing better.
I
So I
love
want to say that.
church and I love worship. I sign to worship. I have to move when I
Yeah.
worship. I'm full into worship, but there's something different about the green. I love the green all around me. I like to go to the
Mhm.
parks that have the green all around me. And if it's a little small trail, I love that. Like,
Yeah.
and it's so healing. It's so grounding, and it's God and it's his nature. And yeah, you said it. I can't
Yeah.
explain it. It became even more important. I liked it before, but
Right.
it was huge for my healing, especially during COVID, right? I mean,
Mhm.
well, this is going on during COVID. So I could do that. I could go to a park at least, but yeah, that's awesome because
Yeah.
everybody has to find their own things. And I encourage everyone to figure out what is good for you, what brings that grounding or that healing or that help to you just to cope, because
Yeah.
there's days that are going to be really hard,
Yeah.
So if it's just coping, we need to cope. Coping is
Yeah.
a good word. I used to think coping was like a wimpy word, but when I looked
Mhm.
it up, it's a good word. It means you're helping yourself to keep going,
Right.
no
And
matter how.
yeah, and that's why I want to bring that up because definitely, as a mechanism of something, like, again, you got to find your thing that works for you, but there are some things that just work, period. And I think being out in nature is one of those things. I also want to mention too, you mentioned about, people being told to, maybe get over it or, when you're dealing with your different griefs. And I always think about grief, and I explain the grief as a wheel. There is a thing called a grief wheel, but I always like to use that analogy because if you think of a wheel on a wheel on a car just is turning as this wheel is rolling down the street, and depending on the road that it's on, it can be smooth. It could be a smooth ride, and you think you're dealing with the grief, and you think everything is good, and then I'm here in Chicago. You might hit a pothole, what I mean? And you hit that pothole, and it throws everything off, and then you're like, oh, I thought I was done with that. It's like no, no, it's just rolling, and as being a wheel, it never stops rolling. Like you said, once you're on it, you're on it for whatever the grief was that caused you to get on it. Once you're on it, you're on it, and it's
Yep.
just a hamster wheel, and it never stops. And again, there will be some days where the road is smooth, and you're like, "Hey, I got this thing under control." And then there will be some days it's a little bit more rocky, and then it might just be a pothole out of nowhere. It just shakes everything up.
I like
So I
that
love to
analogy.
say
I
that.
never thought of it that way. I like that
Yeah,
analogy.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really good. It's a good analogy. Actually, a lot of people assume special dates are
yes,
like, some people don't think of that, but some people assume it's always going to be an issue. It's not always been for me.
yeah,
My daughter's birthday was on Monday. So it did hit me. And part of why it hit me is just my life changed. It's like I'm
mhm,
slowing down. Like in one sense, I'm moving forward in my work in different ways. But in one sense, I'm slowing down. And purpose is huge for me. When I have those goals going forward, that keeps me where I don't get stuck in the depressive or the tendency to maybe be really down or depressed or hopeless. But Monday was her birthday, and I did think of it ahead. And so it was kind of like it was getting ready to be an issue, and it hasn't always been, actually. So sometimes it's not. So don't assume it is, but be ready. You're right. Be ready. Like a pothole. That's true. You don't always know, see them ahead. Or maybe you do, but you're like, oh no, I can't avoid it.
yeah. And you try to brace it, and it's still like,
I'm so now. And I just, long story short, I was desperate for more income. And, my husband had to cut back. I won't go the whole story, but bottom line, I got on Indeed and I see substitute teaching, and it says the town right next to me, the name. So I didn't know. I thought it was public. I wasn't even sure if it was public or what. I'm just going to apply. Let's just do this. If it's that, it'll help me. Whatever. I just thought, here we go. So I jumped in. It ended up being the charter school named Dayspring that my kids went to, my daughter went to.
Mm-hmm.
Now they asked me if I would do, do you want to do elementary, high school? And I said elementary, high school, and I didn't say middle. And then she goes, well, are you open to middle? And I go, yeah, that's fine. Because I speak to middle schoolers and high schoolers at times. So I was like, sure. Well, guess what? They're probably mostly going to have me at the middle school. So there I was at the middle school on Monday, and it was her birthday. And was that pothole, if you want to call it, like you said. And I did leave there, and I went to a store, and I pulled up, and I just sat, and it started to build up, and then I just began to cry. It wasn't they call it grief burst. I don't know if you've ever taught on that or what, but that grief burst might be you're wailing, you're like screaming or you're wailing, but it might just be you're crying. It was crying, but it was definitely a sadness, and I was just longing. I wish I could just give her a hug. I'm not trying to take her out of heaven. She's in a good place, but I wish I could just give her a hug. And I was feeling a lot more sadness than I have been, because overall I'm not done. Again, I would never say that, but overall I've healed a lot, even from the grandchildren thing. I'm in a much better place than I used to be. I used to have that longing that just was such a longing for them. And it, was love. It was, grief is because of love. Mm-hmm. And so that's, if we can remind ourselves and help us to realize that we grieve because we loved, or, we're grieving over what wasn't or will never be, obviously, but it definitely is because of love. So anyway, I really give God the glory for how he's healed my heart. He is the healer of the brokenhearted. The Bible says so. I'm not saying my heart is perfect yet, but he's tremendously. No, I would never say that. I know not to say that, because just like you said, you think, oh, I'm really healed. And you're not. So, but he has healed my heart tremendously. So I definitely put my hope in him. And I've learned to put my hope directly in him more than ever. People will let you down, and people, especially when your heart's already wounded, they can add on to your grief, and you can add on to your own grief with certain things we do. And that's one thing I try to help people with, is let's deal with those things that are in our control, where you don't add to your grief that's already there, because that's enough. And then let's deal with the grief that's there, because, that it just, so important. But, I've learned to realize I don't distrust people. I don't go around, but I don't put my needs into, even my husband. He's a good man, but he can't meet all my needs. Right. So I've really learned to put it into the one who created me and understands me through and through and knows the whole story backwards and forwards and up and down.
Yeah. I want to touch on two things that you mentioned. And I think it's important that we hit on it. One of them is the grief burst, what we call the grief burst. And one of the things that I always tell people is, if you don't make time for grief, it's going to make time, right? And when it decides to show up, it's going to show up. Usually it's not going to be the best time for you. You know what I mean? And so I tell the story of my brother after my mom passed. And this was like maybe a year or so after my mom passed. Like, my mom had been gone a while. And so my mom's house, the house is the driveway runs on the side of the house. You pull up and just pull up on the side of the house up the driveway. And right here on the corner, the little bedroom right in the corner of the front of the house was my mom's bedroom, And so, when you pull into the driveway, you got to pass this window, because that's where her bedroom was. And like I said, this was like a year after my mom had already passed. And my brother was telling me, like, he went to the house, he's going to visit my dad. He pulls in the driveway, and then he looks up at this window and had an outburst. You know what I mean? And so he just in the car, just like bawling his eyes out. You know what I mean? Yes. And so what I tell people, like, you have to make room for grief. You have to take your time to process your grief. So if you manage it where you're taking the time to grieve, then it doesn't have to force its way into your life, because it will. You know what I mean? And so that's where those outbursts come from, because you push it away. I'll deal with it later. And then grief is like, no, I want to deal with it now. And then, you're in the middle of a presentation or something. I remember I wasn't preaching, but I was at church. And this was just kind of just doing the process of me dealing with the grief of my mom passing. But I do remember just being at church, sitting in the pulpit over at the side, and just being overwhelmed with emotion and crying, on the pulpit doing our service at church. Luckily I wasn't preaching, what I mean? It happened. But, again, you have to take that time to process your grief. You have to give grief the time that it warrants, so
That's
that
right.
it doesn't force its way into your life. Because if it forces its way in, it's usually not going to be at the best time for you, right? So
That's very good. Very well said. I totally agree. I've learned a lot, and I think Mr. Gary Rowe, he's, if anybody wants to know, a repertoire of books on grief, different specific griefs too. It could be, he's got ones for mothers, parents, or children. He's been a mentor to me to some degree. And a lot of what he says, it's not all new. It's like confirmation to what God's already put in my spirit about grief, which is kind of cool. It kind of confirmed to me I was called to do this. But you're right. And then again, just give yourself time to be patient. I have this bookmark. I just thought, not that you can see it totally, but I give these out at my workshops. And on the back, I came up with 10 tips. And then when I did it, I was trying to make a bookmark quick for a certain vending opportunity at the time. So I still like pretty much what I wrote in there. I did put in the circle of control in there. But one of them is be kind and patient with yourself. And Gary Rowe says that. He's like, be kind to yourself. He said that to me on an email. And I was like, oh, I've never heard anybody say that. Be kind to myself. Because, we're supposed to be kind to people, be kind to others. And that's important, but we need to be kind to ourselves, especially when we're grieving. So that's one of my in your control things to do for yourself, is to be kind to yourself and patient, because it's you can't rush this. There's no timetable for it. And definitely develop a support system is another biggie. I would just say, I can't go into all the things I say, of course, on this time. But I do talk about all this on my channel. But build, develop. I don't say just have a support system, because that's like poof. Develop a support system. Sometimes people have a pretty good one, but a lot of times the people you think that are going to be supportive, they're not. They just can't handle it. They're afraid. There's different reasons. We could go into that. I'm sure probably Ernest has done that too. But you need to develop a system, and don't assume it's going to be certain people, because you just don't know until you know. Find those safe people, safe support group, mentor, friend, whoever, is safe for you, and develop that, because we can't do this alone. We're not supposed to. We're not made to do grief alone.
Definitely not. The two things. So you mentioned about, I just want to throw this out here because you mentioned about the guy that you were just mentioned who helped you out as well. There is another guy who I follow. Wow, talk about it. His name is Dr. Alan Wolf. Wolfelt. Yes.
That's. I didn't quote him because that's what he actually says, that there's no time. No rush. Wait, I should know the exact quote. That's the quote I'm thinking of. He says there's no speed for time. I can't remember exactly the quote right now. But I followed him too. Yes. Yeah,
I've been following him definitely throughout my journey. I found out about him in doing bereavement myself.
Yes.
In his readings and should I say his writings and different things. I'll even put a couple of links to a couple of books that I still have of his that that's definitely been helpful for me, for everyone who may be interested, that's watching.
A friend of mine gave me one of his books, and I've referred to him specifically on different videos, not like every one of my videos. So you might find one of my videos where I refer to him as well. So
great.
Very well. I actually got online mentoring from a friend of mine. Actually went through the schooling with Wolfelt. So that was how I found out about Wolfelt. So yes, they're both they're both people of faith. Mr. Gary Rowe's even more about the Word of God. I mean, he's very much, he went through all kinds of trauma and grief, crazy stories in his childhood. And then he's adopted. I mean, he's just done like almost everything as an adult. It's amazing what he's accomplished. But he does, if anybody wants to get on his weekly, like his mailing list, he does monthly Zooms, and I love getting on those. I talk about it from the experience I've had, and I'm very real about it. And, it's something that helps to learn from other people. It helps to learn, and it helps to get in a support group, or at least try out a support group. It may not be for you. Get one-on-one. I do one-on-one coaching online and in person. So you can go to my website, juliekay.org, and just look me up either by phone or email. And I do a consult that's only $30. So we can start with that and see if it works, because it's okay to get help. I've gotten help. Mm-hmm. I've gotten counseling for my marriage. And in the last couple of years, I've gotten some counseling. I've gotten counseling for my grief, especially the dynamics of the grandchildren, just like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with my heart? How do I just act? What do I do?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's very important that I'm definitely a big component of, help, whether it's therapy, whether it's grief support groups, whether it's just a friend, somebody. Like, don't try to do this whole thing alone, because when you try to do it alone, you isolate yourself, and then that allows, yourself, your thoughts and all of those things to kind of take over, because you're not getting any outside influences to help you to process what you're dealing with. And then, that's where suicidal ideation start kicking in and all these things, because you're feeling helpless and hopeless and alone. And a lot of the times it's because we've isolated ourselves. And so, I would tell people that when you feel like you're alone, it may be because you've isolated yourself from the very people that could help you. So you got to look out for those loved ones and those support groups or those books or online videos, whatever it is, especially with the internet. You have access to so many resources now, and so many support groups and Facebook groups or whatever, that you can find the group that works for you. You can find them. You know what I mean? And so I want everyone to make sure that they are stepping outside of themselves in order to look and reach for that help as well. And again, you can follow Julie as well and connect with Julie. Julie, I want to thank you so much for being here, man, for being on, for sharing your story and your expertise. I want you to have the last word, right? And I want you to leave us with a word of advice, information, inspiration, however you feel. I'll let you I'll let you decide how you want to express yourself in that way. But I want you to have the last word, and I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. To my audience, thank you guys for tuning in again to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are following us on the dealhealfulfill.org, which is our main website, dealhealfulfill.org. Make sure you guys are following us there to find out more information about what we have going on, events and things that we have coming up. Definitely going to get an overhaul soon on the website to make it more user-friendly. But in the meantime, we are there. Make sure you guys go and check us out there. As you guys know, ebooksbyejames.com, which is was my website where my ebooks were housed. That is no longer up. That website is taken down, but you do have the opportunity to get all of my ebooks now for absolutely free when you join our Deal to Heal School for Living school platform. And just again, the first 7 days is absolutely free. You guys can go there and check out the platform, and then go to the resources tab, and you can download, all of my ebooks absolutely free. So make sure you guys go check that out. You can actually scan the QR code in the upper corner, and that'll take you directly to the Deal to Heal School for Living. So make sure you guys are checking that out, and that way it also gives you access to the ebooks. Deal to Heal tees. We do have our Deal to Heal tees are still active, which is our inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. Make sure you guys go check us out there. That's Deal, the number 2, healtees.com, deal2healtees.com. And we also have our podcast merch, which is our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. So make sure you guys go there in order to check that out as well. Also, one of the things I've been blessed to be a part of over the last couple years is a organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops bi-monthly talking about the area of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, even forgiveness of the world, and forgiveness and wellness, how unforgiveness affects your body. Those workshops are absolutely free. Again, you can go to forgivenessmission.com to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. Whenever you're watching this or listening to this, either a workshop just passed or there's one coming up, so you guys can sign up for it. It's absolutely free, but the information is priceless. So make sure you guys go again to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. And last but not least, I am proud to announce that we have started our nonprofit organization, which is Deal to Heal the World Incorporated. And we also have our 501c3 been approved for our 501c3, which means your donation is now tax deductible. So you can actually write it off on your taxes when you make a donation to help us to bring more healing and more workshops and things that we want to do to the community, free for the community, right? We want things to be free for the community, but there are costs to things. And so if you guys want to make a donation, one-time donation or recurring donation to help us bring more healing and things to the community, more services to the community, make sure you make a donation to the Deal to Heal the World Incorporated, so that we can help us to further our mission. All of these links and information will be in the description, so make sure you guys go and check that out there. Again, Julie, I want to say thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for taking out your time to share your story and your expertise. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. You're welcome, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'd say that what's on my heart is that purpose you have. That is part of your saying, is to fulfill your purpose. Kind of is the last, but it's not the last, but it mixes in. And I definitely, my purpose changed. My dream, without going into what my dream was, it's shifted. It definitely shifted, and there's no way it could be the same as what my dream used to look like, as far as what I really, really would love to see happen in my life, business and ministry wise and helping others. It definitely shifted, and it became two different lanes. I got to tell my daughter's story, and because of the fentanyl overdose and the epidemic, and I got to help. I want to help people with grief. I want to help people with grief. I want to be a part of the solution, and there's not enough people helping. So that was the two things that I went forward. And my purpose did come out of my pain. It's a phrase, but I do agree with that phrase, that it can happen when you get the help you need and work through it with some of the principles we talked about today, but even more principles than that. You can work through it, and you can find purpose. Your purpose might be like mine. I actually found new purpose in directly the loss of my daughter and the grandkids, and be able to help people out of what helped me. And so it's come pretty direct out of it. I didn't start a foundation on it like a lot of people have. So, but your purpose might come out in a whole new way. So it doesn't have to line up with your loss, but it may, and oftentimes it does. So, but having a purpose and having knowing that you are important and you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that God has planted gifts inside of you and abilities inside of you, is going to help you to move forward. You still have to take that time to work through all of it, but it's going to help you. And when I don't feel that, I can start to get depressed or more negative in the realm where I don't want to be. So I encourage you to pray and find your purpose and take little steps forward. If you're at the beginning of your loss, don't rush yourself. But if you have a desire that comes up that you want to do in relation to your loss or something different, don't like push that aside, because that could be the very thing that's really good for you. So that would be my last tip, is find purpose in your pain, or do something new out of that to help you move forward. And helping others is definitely going to help you. It's definitely going to help you.
Yeah. That's 100%. Helping others always help you. And I think that's the main thing that we're here when we find out, and we're looking into finding our purpose. One of the questions that you can ask yourself is, who do I want to serve? Because that's how you find your purpose. Thank you so much, Julie. We can't end to no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. To deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.